On September 4th, 1944, New York experienced its largest earthquake on record as a 5.8 on the Richter scale, which occurred between Messina, New York, and Cornwall, Ontario, Canada. The estimated damages for this quake were around $2 million for both cities. Many structures hereafter were considered unsafe and not fit for occupancy until they were fixed. Aside from this earthquake, there haven't been any recent disastrous earthquakes in the region for quite some time. Though that does not mean New York is not at risk to have another one. With areas like the West Quebec seismic zone and the old Ramapo fault system, New York could foresee more earthquakes in the future and must be ready for them given its large population. New York is located on the North American plate, with a relatively small amount of the state having a coast along the Atlantic Ocean. The state is made up of several different forms of rock, but some definite trends can be seen. The northern portion of the state is the oldest part, and is comprised mainly of quartzite and marble from the Middle Proterozoic era. The south is relatively newer, and consists of limestone, sandstone, and shale dating all the way back to the late Proterozoic and through Cambrian, Ordovician, and Devonian times. The entire island, that is New York City, comprises of gravel and clays from the Cretaceous period. The northeast and southeast tips of the state experience the heaviest density of earthquakes. The north experiences earthquakes due to the West Quebec seismic zone. This zone is quite active, with magnitude 3 earthquakes occurring fairly regularly. The largest recorded quake from the West Quebec zone occurred in 1935 when a magnitude 6.2 struck the area of Timiskaming, Canada. Earthquakes in southern New York can be explained by the Ramapo fault line. This rather large fault runs from Pennsylvania into New Jersey and into the southern tip of New York. While geologists state that the fault is fairly stable, it still registers small quakes now and then, with quite a few being reported between 1990 and 2006.
Most Americans may think all our earthquakes are centered, but California's San Andreas is just one fault zone. There are at least 4 active earthquake zones that cover this country, all of which seismologists say have had historic eruptions, and each could have another catastrophic strike at any time.
Earthquakes occur as large sequences of events, not just a main shock.
New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania have the 70-mile-long Ramapo Fault. These streaks are really all that's visible of the Ramapo Fault, and they continue all the way up this rock. It's one of the largest in the Northeast, and we're really just about an hour outside of New York. Never heard of it? Well, it's been quiet for a couple of hundred years, and seismologists say that's part of the problem.
We know in the future at some point an earthquake is going to occur, but we don't really understand the rules of the game yet in this area.
What we do know is the last major activity on the Ramapo Fault was a 5.2 centered in Brooklyn, New York in 1884. And if that same quake hit today, there are now 8 million residents of New York City. All could be affected by the Ramapo Fault's dangerous reach.
One important fault is the one that crosses Manhattan from the Hudson River to the East River, more or less along 125th Street. That's a well-known fault. There are tunnels constructed for the water and for the subway lines underneath that cross this fault.
In 2011, a magnitude 5 earthquake hit Richmond, Virginia. This quake was felt in Washington, D.C., Cleveland, and even in New York City. While New York may not face any immediate danger from earthquakes given the lack of faults in the area, it doesn't mean they are immune to them. With the Ramapo fault line in the West Quebec seismic zone, there are still some mild earthquakes here and there. But because New York is such a highly populated state, it is important that we prepare for anything to occur in the coming years. The New York City Area Consortium for Earthquake Loss and Mitigation can help with the reduction of damage and loss if such an earthquake were to occur because of the building and residential laws they have passed, making them more resistant to earthquake damage. Though New York has not had any devastating earthquakes as of late, it is still susceptible to them.